What disturbing thing did you learn about someone only after their death? My uncle killed himself after he was caught at a bestiality brothel in Nevada. Of course, we only found out why he killed himself when the police showed up at my parents' house, wanting to know if he had any pets at home. He did not. There are bestiality brothels? Heavy petting zoos. Angrily upvoting this, hysterically awful. Not really disturbing, but I found a restraining order against my mom banning her from entering our local grocery store. I will never know that story. That sounds like a story I want to know. I have a friend that is banned from a grocery store. Basically what he did was going on those scales that weighed the vegetables and fruit and weighted everything he bought as bananas because it was the cheapest thing. Got caught. I have a funny grocery store banning story you can hear. When a buddy of mine was in high school, they started putting self-checkout machines at the Stop and Shop. He discovered that he could just walk in, grab 230 racks of beers, and walk out the self-checkout, and no one would ever notice. He became the beer hookup for his underage friends and would do his foolproof plan every weekend. Then one weekend at a party in the next town over with a bunch of groups of kids from the next town's school, from across the yard another kid he'd never met before goes, "Oh my god, it's you." The kid worked at Stop and Shop, and in the back room of the Stop and Shop, even in the surrounding towns he had not visited, there were posters of him, essentially branding him Stop and Shop enemy number 1. The kid said, "Dude, people are looking for you." Like a lot of people. He stopped going to Stop and Shop ever again and had to make up excuses or drive far away to a different chain of store in a different town if his mom asked him to get something. This is a good story. It's got both the amusement and shame that you would expect from a grocery store ban story. My great-grandfather had a whole other wife with 7 children he told no one about. Edit. If you're descended from a large Hastings or Brown family from Lancashire, let me know lol. This is incredibly common. Can't believe the amount of people who got away with this until after they died. I guess back in the day there was no internet and people tended to stay and settle in their hometown, so odds they'd bump into one another were slim. Hot still, I imagine I'd call my kids other kids' names accidentally on occasion. Yep, it's coming out more and more with 23andMe and Ancestry. My dad was adopted. We always assumed his birth mother was a teenager in trouble. But she was actually a 35-year-old married woman whose husband was away at war and she got pregnant to a visiting serviceman. So I popped up on these websites as a cousin, second cousin, etc., and part of this huge Catholic family in the South Island of New Zealand. She is long dead, so they can't ask her questions, but I'm sure I was an interesting topic of conversation at Christmas. Finding out your mom had a son and his daughter is contacting you. I received a phone call from my late husband's girlfriend the day of his funeral. She was phoning his cell phone, which I had turned off while he was in the hospital. She told me that my husband had been paying her rent for the last year. The bank had recently foreclosed on our house. I had no idea he was unfaithful to me, but she knew all about me. Edit. Thank you for the silver and gold and all the wonderful messages. Your caring and concern has brought me to tears many times today. Although I have recently tried to start dating again, I have health issues which cause problems in my marriage, and I am apprehensive to try again. If I did not have my children, young adults now, pushing me, I think I would be content to become a crazy cat lady. Jesus Christ. Hope you're on the mend. That's awful. Something similar happened to my mom. My dad had this mistress for whom he paid all the bills, including even her college bills. She was probably like 30 or 35. And he was 44 when he died. The college thing really hurt my mom as she always wanted to go herself, but there was never money. Anyways, the woman had the nerve to show at his funeral. She didn't stay, but went by the casket to say goodbye. Really shitty. My mom found out about their relationship before his passing, but he had tried to make amends, told her he and the woman were done for, etc., and my mom stayed because of her 3 kids. My dad would often threaten to kill me and my siblings, my mom and then himself if she left. We caught him cheating long before that as well. Lots of stories. My mom went through hell with that mofo. I don't really miss him at all, and I'm glad I didn't get to grow into an adult having him in my life, although given all his shit I matured a lot earlier than kids do. I was 11 when he died. Anyway, my mom endured a lot because of him. I do not know how I could possibly go through what she did. She's a true hero. Edit. Grammar. I had a great aunt and great uncle who were full-time missionaries in Africa. After they died, 3 of their grandchildren finally felt safe enough to share that my great aunt and uncle had molested them. God knows what they were really doing in Africa. If they molested OP, then they almost certainly were molesting children on their missions. My wife works in developmental aid and has done work in Central Africa. Once she began working for larger companies, she told me that they have to be extremely careful about who travels to Africa to help out, volunteers, donors, etc., because there is a business, yes, business, in Westerners traveling to third world countries and raping children because it is more difficult to get caught. I remember not believing her at first because I didn't believe that humans could be so depraved, but once you realize that it is extremely common, your innocence gets shattered. A friend flew to a third world country in Latin America and was shocked when he saw the large sign at the airport in English advising visitors that sex with minors was a crime there. I went to Brazil for the World Cup. We ended up in Natal. Getting out of baggage claim, there were a bunch of signs and people handing out pamphlets to all the men on this topic. I am in the apparent target demographic, white, middle-aged male. In my travels, I get offered this shit a lot, along with everything else the underbelly of society has to offer. It's disturbing in a way. My great-grandmother went into the military after committing a crime, and in the military she confessed to a judge who punished her by extending her military contract and forcing her to serve in the war. I never knew what happened until way after she died, and I had asked my dad about it. There was a pedophile in her neighborhood who was touching kids and he was going after boys. My G-mama mutilated his wank and beat the crap out of him when she saw him try to lift 2 boys. I'd like to thank her for her service. All-around service. Protecting her community and her country. Apparently this story is not uncommon. Brother-in-law's best friend rang him distraught after going through his recently deceased, much older sister's papers. He had discovered that she wasn't his sister as he had thought for the last 70 years, she was his mother. Usual story, teenage pregnancy, went to a convent to have the baby, gave it to mum to bring up. He apparently had a good relationship with her, and he was upset because she couldn't tell him the truth. Edited to add. Judging by the response, it is really common. And yes, Jack Nicholson. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Jack Nicholson's childhood was similar to this. Jack Nicholson and Eric Clapton. I feel so sorry for the young mothers. Imagine living with that knowledge that you birthed the child, and now you must pretend you have a new baby brother or sister. Honestly, I think that arrangement is more civilized than having to abandon your baby to an orphanage or to strangers if you really wanted to keep it, but your family wouldn't allow it. You still get to see them grow up and have a close relationship with them, and you aren't having to raise a baby while still in school, etc. Obviously the relationship with the parents would be strained, and depending how they feel about it, might hold a grudge about having to raise a child that isn't theirs, but I don't imagine a non-supportive family would even suggest keeping the baby in the family anyway. Considering how many horror stories there are from the relatively recent past of young women being forcibly sent away to convents to conceal the pregnancy, give birth, and have their baby taken away for the sake of family reputation, this arrangement doesn't seem too bad. My uncle had a son he never told us about for 25 years. My grandpa had a son he never told us about too, and my grandma's current fear is that one day he'll come looking for my grandpa, and she'll have to tell him that he died over 10 years ago. This just happened with my father. Did a gene test and was contacted by a sister I didn't know I had on my dad's side. She had been looking her whole life, her mom gave her a list of possible names, but my dad went by a nickname. Had to let her know he passed a decade ago. Was tough. That for the first few months my mother was pregnant with me, the entire family thought she was dying from an ovarian tumor. She was 41 and it was the 1960s, her doctor at the Navy hospital just assumed she was too old to get pregnant. Edit. Fixed spelling. I actually have an uncle that was initially diagnosed as a tumor for the exact same reasons. How weird. I read this wrong and thought you said diagnosed with a tumor, which completely changes the sentence, haha. That my grandfather molested my mom when she was a child. It started after my grandmother died and ended after he found someone else. I was pretty shocked, especially since my mom didn't seem to carry any kind of baggage from it, though of course I don't know what went and still goes on in her head. Something that made sense though was how she always made sure my brother and I were either in her room to sleep whenever we stayed at Grandpa's place, which wasn't too often, or in the room next to hers. We were never alone with my grandfather, and we never had a warm or loving relationship with him. He was cold to us and we never really got attached to him, and we visited him maybe once a year. I think my mom felt obligated to have a relationship with him for some reason, but she was always very protective of us, and my brother and I were never victims of his. She deserves the world and so much peace. My grandpa had stashed what would be worth millions today and proceeded to convince his family they were poor and had almost no money. His family lived in poverty while he lied to them all. My dad did something somewhat similar. He had sole control over all family finances. We definitely didn't live in poverty by any means, but he stressed my mom out about bills and sudden expenses and stuff all the time by claiming we were tight on money or running out of money or he wasn't making as much at the moment or etc. He'd go as far as claiming we could lose the house, lose the cars, he might lose his job soon, we might not be able to pay the water, electric and phone bill, oh no. Yeah, he had a shit ton of money secretly stashed away in a separate bank account and was living lavishly on his business trips. There was never any danger to our house or possessions or way of life. He said those things and started those arguments for the sick pleasure of causing my mom pain and stress and feeling powerful. And maybe for the thrill of having a secret. Who knows for sure, I guess. Edit for addition. Since I'm seeing a lot of questions. My mom is dead now, but my dad isn't. I found out all this stuff by digging through his stuff during their divorce. My mom didn't tell me any of this and didn't want me to look through his stuff. I found it all on my own. And my mom wasn't a stay-at-home mom either. She worked her ass off to give him money to help provide for us while he was playing WoW all day and getting rich siphoning money off his best friend's company. Your dad's a cunt. I like how you got right to the point. You are correct. What a horrible way to live. Believe it or not, people can get good at hoarding wealth and minimalizing expenditure on the altar of being financially responsible. There are of course different types of reasons why, but sometimes people take it to such a high degree. I'd imagine there is a layer of people who grew up poor and are happy with that existence despite having the means of improving their quality of life. I wouldn't say they are entirely bad, but when it starts to impact others they should loosen up a bit. Had a relative who did that to a smaller extent. He sat on his hoard like a dragon because he was very concerned that no one would take care of his intellectually disabled first son after the father's death. Sadly, he didn't trust his other normal son and his wife either, although they were trustworthy and not greedy. Result. The intellectually disabled son lost all of his share with drinking buddies in a few years. The normal son kept the rest and looked after his brother as he would have done anyway. My BIL died in an accident, and his wife found out by going through his phone that he was sleeping with several other women. Many of whom were pretty close in our friend group, and some were also married. It was quite awkward and got pretty messy. Sister's fiancé died very suddenly and very tragically from a heart attack. She was 20, he was 23. It was an underlying condition. In the months following his death, she found out he had been cheating on her basically since the start of their relationship, 2 to 3 years. Some women were long-term and knew about her, others were just casual one-night stands that Prob didn't know. She kind of went off the deep end a little because now was she not only mourning a man she loved, she now had to deal with this fact without being able to ask him for answers. Silver lining though, she ended up dating and marrying one of his good friends. They sort of bonded in the aftermath of his death. He is the best thing that ever happened to her and vice versa. They will be married for 3 years this summer. That's exactly what happened to me. I lost my wife to a drunk driver, and then I found out she had been cheating on me all through our marriage. Edit. Shit, this exploded. I am not happy that she's dead. Despite what she did to me, no one deserves this. Nobody. Yes, I destroyed and trashed all her stuff, but that's because I flew into a fit of rage after discovering just what she'd been doing to me. Sorry, Dippity. I'm completely over her, actually. One thing that really helped me heal was destroying and trashing everything she owned. I actually consider myself divorced. After my grandfather's death, we were cleaning out his old house, and I found an envelope with paperwork that basically said my dad had died by suicide. I had been told as a kid that it was a heart attack. It was a shitty way to find out the truth. That's dark, I'm sorry it is dark, but also highlights how much your family wanted to protect your feelings for as long as possible. Not saying that's right, but it's definitely human. Something similar happened to me. I was emancipating myself at 17, and I needed my mom's death certificate. It was ruled a suicide, and that wasn't what I was told my entire life. She died when I was 5. I had a brother who had some paranoid delusions, FBI, CIA following him, spying on his apartment, etc. My brothers and I had tried to get him help, and he would just have no part of it. After a few years, it seemed like it had gotten better. He stopped bringing it up, and we felt like it must have just passed. After he died, we found his journal and it was just horrifying. Right up until the night he died, he detailed all of the torture that they were inflicting on him, weird shit that I can't even write in here. It was just incredibly disturbing to read what a tortured life he was living inside his mind, while acting relatively normal outside. Edit. Many people have asked me to go into more detail on what he wrote. I can't go into much detail, it's hard for me to write about. Briefly, he believed that they were using some type of focused energy beam to torture him. They focused on different parts of his body at different times. Every noise that an appliance made was proof of electronic surveillance. Every bump on the wall or person walking in an adjacent apartment was a message from either the bad FBI agents or the good FBI agents. This one has upset me the most. He wasn't doing anything wrong, he didn't hurt anyone, but he was hurting so much inside. It would be so hard to read. I'm so sorry for the loss of your brother. That's how mental illness works. It's a nice private personal hell for some people. One of my greatest fears is someone finding the mood journal I keep for therapy. Every day I track my mood, scale 1 to 10, things that set me off or made me happy, feelings and whatnot. As an exercise in mental health, it's vital to my well-being, but outside that context, it looks like scrambling of someone on the verge of breakdown. Just notes on things that made me angry or sad, not even remotely a good look. Maybe they would understand, but it's just terrifying to think of someone finding it. I once had a friend whose dad died and he never really talked about it, but he was pretty troubled. Every year on his death date, they would have a celebration of life party. He invited our friend group one year, and we were all excited to be there to support him. Turns out his dad died in a car accident involving a drunk driver. The dad was the drunk driver and also killed the family he hit. Jesus. How did you guys react? I once went to a joint funeral of a guy who killed his wife, shot a lover, he lived and turned the gun on himself. Super awkward. Well, we kinda brought it up to him to see how he really felt about everything, and he defended his dad. I understand that's a hard situation because you lost your dad, but your dad also killed the whole family. I'm not friends with him anymore. For a different reason. But that helped in my decision to break our friendship. He was very troubled that weekend we were with him for the celebration. He ended up sexually assaulting my best friend. But no one but me and her know about it. Obviously she isn't friends with him either. He does sound very troubled. I'm sorry that happened to your friend. Probably better off without him in your lives. That's how I feel. Unfortunately, one of our guy friends is still friends with him. When my best friend tried to tell this guy friend what happened to her, he didn't believe her. I'm not friends with that guy friend either. But she is still friends with that one. Family friend that passed was having sex with young male prostitutes, had his wife hooked on drugs that he provided with his doctor's license, and had spent all of their money even though they had been rich so that they were destitute, and his wife and kids had no idea. She lost the house a month after he died unexpectedly. She and her kids are doing fine now. She's recovered and remarried. How old was he when he passed? I've already posted so much information about it already, I'm not really comfortable sharing more. So let's just say old enough to know better. I'm hoping not to another doctor. That they didn't die when we thought. Here's the deal. My mom was raised by her mom, now 92, and an evil old bat, and her stepfather, who molested her. Where was dad? Died when she was 11, allegedly. That's what my grandmother said. This would have been around 1961. Flash forward to 2015 and my sister is doing genealogy work on the family. Finds out not only did my biological grandfather not die in 1961, he died in 2005. And had 5 more daughters, one of which he gave the same name as my mom. So my mom got cheated out of a potential relationship with her dad by her liar of a mom, who moved and remained hidden from her ex, my mom's real dad. My grandmother moved down to Texas from Virginia to stay in a nursing home and basically make my mom and dad's life hell. We went to visit one weekend and she came over for dinner. And I dropped the bomb on her that we'd figured out she'd been full of shit for 50 years. She then had the nerve to act offended. My dad told her to STFU. I like that your dad had your back. My mom's uncle stole my grandfather's gun and killed himself. Afterward they found out that he had been hiding in his ex-wife's bathroom for hours waiting to kill her and their kids, but gave up because they took so long to come home. They were pretty messed up after that and never really recovered. Thankfully he only ended up taking out himself. Crazy how small details and decisions can change or end your whole life, like what if she had decided to come home earlier with her kids? How did they know he wanted to kill them? He left an hour-long cassette tape with recordings on both sides. It was mostly just him rambling on and on about everything in his life that went wrong and how it was everyone else's fault. I think they still have it for some reason. My buddy's mom totally killed my buddy's dad. She had taken a $200,000 life insurance policy out on him 6 months before he died, and he died from not taking his medication that he'd taken no problem all of his life. My buddy was away for the weekend so wasn't home when his dad died. After his mom died, we found out she'd taken a life insurance policy out on my buddy at some point too, and she'd also forged his signature to sign over $100,000 my buddy's dad had left to him. She also faked illnesses to get prescription drugs and had little books filled with info on what she'd sold and how much she'd made from selling them. Man, makes you wonder if and what she had in store for him. Yup, lol. She robbed my buddy blind and he had no clue. She took his inheritance from his grandma too that he'd had no clue about and gave a big chunk of it to her friends, his godparents, who used it to buy a beach house. My grandpa was one strict by the book son of a bitch, but after he died, we found a bunch of weed in his closet. Reminds me of how my brother and I found out my dad smokes weed. My dad has always seemed pretty square. One day he tells my brother they need to take a walk out to the shed. Our entire lives dad has always made it clear the shed is off limits. Dad takes my brother out there and right before opening the door tells my brother the wife says it's better you know now than find out after I die and you feel like you never knew me at all. He then opens the door to reveal his grow house. My brother couldn't wait to tell me that the secret dad has been hiding in the shed for 40 plus years is that he grows and smokes weed. It's now the source of many jokes and dad often gifts my brother with amazing weed. Wholesome stoners.
Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Tell me what you dislike or love about this video, so please comment below and hit the bell icon so you're notified anytime a new video is released. This is a WeCrow Media production.